Welcome, everyone. Committee of the Whole, Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Nlaka'pamux and Syilx people. Adoption of minutes. 2.1, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes, October 16th, 2024. Recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on October 16th, 2025 be adopted. Councillor Egan, Councillor Etchart. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bang, bang, bang. Let's move to new business 5.1. We have merit of city development cost charges bylaw update to be presented by Shiming Hang, a planner. But Mr. Green would like to do a preamble to let us know how we got here. So we will start with you, CAO, if you don't mind. Not a problem.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just wanted to give you a little rundown on where this started and everything that's sort of happened up to where we are right now. The DCC bylaw was given to a consultant in the spring of 2022, shortly after the flood. And with the staff turnover that happened all the time, by the time I got here in August, it was pretty much sitting untouched at that point. And the consultant that was working on it was working off of a bunch of data that was provided to him from past staff with a project list that was very large. So I got asked to project manage the project and sort of try and get it over the finish line when we got here. And we quickly noticed that there were some problems with how the numbers were working out with what the consultant had been generating. And it was, on quick look, going to produce somewhere around the time number of about 9 times the current rate of DCC bylaws numbers, which was probably unpalatable in the community in general. If we take things from where they are and go up 9 times, we'll completely stifle development likely. So we took a look ourselves without the consultant's help at that point and broke down everything that we had and quickly discovered that the project lists that all the numbers were based on were not what I'd call realistic. So there was projects on there that probably did have no chance at all of being constructed over the next 20-25 years, let alone the short term of 3 to 5 years where we want to keep the project window on a DCC bylaw. So that general expectation of a developer is they're going to pay into a DCC account. They're going to want to see the fruits of that payment pay off in the way of infrastructure to help their development in the near future. So when we're including projects that are legitimately, 20 years plus out, we're skewing the numbers quite a bit. So what we did is we tore the project list down into 3 categories. And the trouble with putting our hands on it at that point is when we don't deal with the science of what they're trying to do with the numbers, let the numbers talk, we start trying to direct an outcome that is palatable rather than letting the science talk. But when the science is based on a project list, that was probably flawed in the first place because there was too much involved. Then we have to do a little bit of targeting, or we have to stop, go all the way back, start again, and develop a new project list, new cost estimates, and basically start from scratch. And at that point, we were already a little over halfway into the project payment-wise, as far as what the consultant was earning. And starting all over again would mean probably even more years. And it's taken years to get us to this point. So long story short, a little over a year ago, we decided to take this into our own hands after the consultant became non-responsive for quite some time. There was a little bit of changes asked of them and some arguments, I guess, over philosophy and payment and things like that. So they became a lot less responsive over a period of time. So we'd ask the planning department then to pick the project up, ask Shiming very specifically to get into the theory and try and get into all the data and build us something that makes sense, at least from a numbers perspective on the output. Because honestly, when it comes to something like this, and DCCs tend to be a little bit of a gray matter kind of a concept. There's a lot of data involved here. And my request of you would be not to focus so much on the details of project lists and a lot of how things are generated. Your responsibility largely is going to be trying to come up with the number that makes sense, because too high of a number at the end of the day is going to stifle development. Too low of a number is going to burden taxpayers a little bit too much on infrastructure development long range. So the overall political decision has to pretty much come from that 30 to 50,000 foot level. We've already done the work in the weeds with the data and tried to strip things down as much as possible. When we look at the projects, we can update these things annually and keep it in-house and keep it a living document. We should be doing annual increases that go with inflation that we're allowed to do. And as projects move in and out, because you never know who's going to develop where and what might be required. So everything's pretty much a guess. So if we keep our vision on that short term, closer to 5 years, we can move projects in and out based on what's actually moving in the community and what's not, rather than try and populate the whole thing based on a whole bunch of projects that may or may not ever actually happen. So that's sort of the caution on this is we need to think very much about how these things apply and the impact they're going to have to the community. Getting it wrong right now. I know there's been some conversations in the past of developers should pay for everything, but bearing in mind that if our rates are higher than comparable communities, we're not going to get and attract the investment in town, which means we're not going to be having developers build anything. Like I said, if the rates are too low, we're going to probably get a whole bunch of building, and we are right now. There's a lot of things going on. One of the contributing factors is the low DCC rates. It makes us very attractive to somebody trying to build something. The downside is when they need infrastructure, we still have to gain the size of the infrastructure and the capacity that the impacts of the development are having. And if we don't have enough money in the accounts to do that work, then it falls on the tax base to do it. Bearing in mind that as development happens as well, we increase our tax base overall. So the nuts and bolts of this are probably less relevant than the general, what are we trying to achieve in the community from, are we open for development versus, and that can be get rid of the DCC bylaw altogether, or do we make developers pay for everything that they're impacting and then have them not invest in town? So when I look at these things, I look at the comparisons to more of the communities that we'd be competing with and what their rates are at. And hopefully we're a little more encouraging than they are, but we want to have enough money in there that we're getting some infrastructure paid for and the capacity is increased going forward. So it's not a full burden to the tax base. So that's what's mostly relevant to me. Doesn't mean that's going to guide your decisions, but I caution you not to focus on the project list, because the project list is from a point in time back in 2021, which was pre-flood. And all the cost estimates were done at that point. And it's taken this long to work off the side of our desks and get this thing over the finish line without the help of external consultants after a certain point. So the data is a little bit dated, and we've tried to add a couple of projects that are current, similar to, we have wastewater treatment plant, Kengard well, things that we know are very important on the capital plan, but we don't have a long-range capital plan to work off of at this point. We haven't completed all the asset management work. So a lot of this is basically thumb sucks that go into what makes sense and what doesn't. So try not to let the data distract you too much from the obligation of how are we going to let these rates impact the community and how are we going to go forward with it. So with that, I'd like to call Shimming up, and he's going to go through with Krisha, I believe, and go through the slide presentation, and we can have some conversations during and after, and we'll see where this takes us. Also, don't feel bad that if we're getting in the weeds on this and we're not there after the presentation, we don't necessarily have to force this into sort of the first reading at the next 1 or 2 council meetings. This is something that has been sitting for a very long time. Our last update was 2007, I believe. And we don't have to do it right now if you're not comfortable. So let's make sure that we understand what we're doing and the impacts of our decisions. And we should be able to put something together that makes sense for everybody. Okay.
Thanks, you. Sorry if I butchered your last name, Shimming.
It's all good. Thank you. Do I still need to push
You
it,
are
or-
good to go.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you. Just gonna quickly go over, next slide. Sorry. Great, thank you. Yeah. Is there one? Oh, okay. Yeah, so just gonna quickly give you an overview of presentation. So I'm just gonna start with giving a overview of explaining what DCCs are and bit of the legislative background, and then go into a bit more detail about like why we're updating the DCCs bylaw, and then the process to get that we got calculating the current DCC rates. So based off as Mr. Green was talking about the previous consultant's work. And then we'll talk a bit about the engagement feedback we received and then possible mechanisms to adjust the rates based on what basic the decision the conversations that happened tonight. Yeah. So I'm hoping to just try to get through the presentation first and do answers questions and discussion after. So thank you. So development cost charges are a financing tool authorized by the Local Government Act to assist with local governments with funding growth-related infrastructure. And this is charged on new development, and this can be used to pay for infrastructure that's already been provided that provides that capacity, or it could be used in anticipation of the future development needs. So the infrastructure related to that. And the underlying assumption for this is growth should pay for growth rather than having the taxpayers be the ones who build out all the infrastructure for developers come in and then just leave. And since it's a tool for since it's a tool for financing growth related infrastructure, there's a specific list of categories that the DCCs can be charged for, and that is for highways, or essentially roads and transportation, drainage or stormwater, water mains, sewer, parkland. And as of 2023, DCCs can also now be used to charge for fire protection facilities, so new fire halls, police stations, and waste and recycling facilities as well. So this only covers the portion that's the upgrade part. If it's just replacing existing infrastructure with no capacity upgrades, then DCCs can't be used for that part. It also doesn't cover, say, the sidewalks along for developments that require building out sidewalks in the very front of their frontage, because that's something that's covered under the subdivision and development standards in the bylaw. It also doesn't cover other things such as City Hall, if we want one, community centers. In terms of how DCCs fit into the development approval cycle, they're required to be paid prior to the final approval of subdivision or a building permit. And for most big projects, such as Maplewood or the apartments at Conklin, they were required to pay their DCCs at the time of building permit. Then there are other projects which are like subdivisions, such as Nicholson, that's on the bench. Their DCCs were paid on subdivision approval, and that's because they were low density. So development cost charges are meant to be aligned with the official community plan. And this is because the official community plan is typically the source of determining the growth projections as well as the infrastructure that the DCCs would be applied to. And our current bylaw, as it was adopted in 2007, was built on the infrastructure projects and policies in the 2004 OCP. And since then, the city has renewed the OCP 2 times and also completed a number of infrastructure master plans to get like better sense of where the pipes should go or infrastructure is needed. This update to the OCP, sorry, getting confused. The DCC bylaw would align this one this bylaw to the 2022 OCP. So So as I talked about previously, DCCs are typically calculated on the forecasted growth and infrastructure needs as outlined in the OCP. And because DCCs can only cover the cost of infrastructure required to support growth, the benefit factor, that's to talk to the infrastructure upgrades, that would be the portion that would be attributable to growth. So for example, a pipe upsizing, it would be that part that's bigger than the previous pipe. And that's part of what goes into determining which part of the costs of a whole project can be eligible for DCC's recovery. And that also includes the municipal assist factor, and that goes back to the Local Government Act legislation that says DCCs are to assist local government and not to completely cover it. So that's why there's always going to be a portion of that the municipality has to contribute towards growth. And finally, once we have all the costs, figuring out which parts are for the for servicing growth, then that's distributed across the development that we're expecting to see. And that will be distributed across different kinds of land uses, as we'll talk about in a bit. So the projects here are from the OCP, and then the main ones for roads are the Armstrong reconstruction, Vote Street reconstruction, including the MUP. So that was one of the projects that was identified. And then there's also storm mains and other water mains around town, and then also Canguard Well. And the other one that I didn't have on the slide would be the East Merritt Utility Corridor for the sewer portion of the upgrades. And of course, a detailed list that was built off of is in the background report that was provided. So here we have the project cost summary for all the DCC projects. So for example, we can see for the roads, it's 6.1 million for the total cost, and benefits allocation of 10 to 45%, meaning some roads projects, 10% would be attributable to growth, whereas some would be 45% would be a growth related expansion. And based on those, we got the DCC recovery amount of 1.7 million, and there's 1% assist. And so once we take the DCC's recoverable portion off of the total amount, then you have, we're still keeping with the road category here, 4.4 million, which would be the city's responsibility. And then averaged out over 15 years is 0.29 million over the DCC's timeframe, which is aligned with the OCP. So we also have a sample calculation. It's again, we have the 6.1 million and then the 1.7 that's recoverable for the DCC's section. The portion at the top of the table, that's just showing the calculations for how we get to distributing the numbers for the final roads DCC rates that we have at the bottom there. So next slide. So after that's been done for all 4 of the categories, so water, roads, drainage, water, and sewer, we have our total, which is shown here as 23, or for low density residential. Yeah.
Per DU, like that's development unit?
Sorry, that's for per dwelling unit.
Okay, so that's if somebody's building a 6-plex, they have to pay 24 grand per unit?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
And then I'll also do a bit more explaining.
Okay, thanks.
But thank you. So yeah, so just to make my math easier, I chose 10 units instead of 6 units. And that would be, say, for example, a medium density development. So it'd be 10 times the 11,885.4 because that's per dwelling unit. So the total, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong number. 17,000 essentially for per unit. So then times 10, so that's 170,000. That would be the total DCCs that they would pay for that development. Yeah, and then you have for the commercial, industrial, and institutional, that's by square meters. So it's pretty much if someone's building a 100 square meter commercial unit development, then that essentially translates to 89,000. Sorry, I can't do math. 89,000 would be their total DCCs for that project. Yeah. And just a quick note about the land uses for residential. So this is based on a density gradient. So if the more units you build, the idea is that the higher density units have a lower impact on the overall services. And this is aligned with the density gradient that we see in the zoning bylaw, but it doesn't reference the zones directly because sometimes if you're building in the city center and you have less units, you'd fall into a different gradient. And just to make sure that when you're building in low density residential zone versus building in city center, you'd have the same rates that you're paying for the same development rather than different rates if you build it differently in a different place. It's also, DCCs are not charged for accessory dwelling units such as secondary suites or detached secondary dwellings. And that's mostly because not every low density or medium density development will have one of those accessory dwelling. And also the rates of that, basically the impact is kind of assumed to be part of the calculations for low and medium density.
Councillor Chair.
In the introduction page, it talked about where DCCs would be exempt, and you had A, B, C, D, and E. And so it said you would be exempt where it wouldn't be, if the DCCs were already paid, except where if it was under 50,000. So that's just A, B, C, or D, right? It doesn't mean it has to be under 50,000. It just means that if you're doing maybe a renovation where you have a building permit and it's not affecting any of the piping or development that you need, then they don't have to. Is that?
I take it that you're asking about the exemptions from the
Yeah.
DCCs?
Yeah. Exactly.
So this one is, sorry, just trying to clarify your question. So you're asking if like the accessory dwelling units, is that part of the exemption?
That would be exempt because you're putting like a carriage home would be an accessory dwelling unit, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so that would be considered, as part of like an exemption. Yeah, and we'll talk about the exemptions from the DCCs towards the end.
All right.
So we'll get back to that too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide is fine. So I just have prepared a few tables just comparing the DCC rates to the other communities nearby. Kind of hard to see, yeah. So our rates are going to be going, based on the proposal, that's going to be going up around 2 to 3 times, and that will put us roughly in the neighborhood of like where the more recent DCC's bylaws passed by other municipalities since 2020 are, and it would also be around where their average is, which is in the line that you can barely see. And then also just quick note that Peachland and West Kelowna, they also are subject to the school district a levy for the schools, as well as DCCs from the Central Okanagan Regional District. So those add on top of what the city has, and that would push their rates above 30K per dwelling unit for the low density residential. So number here, what people will actually pay would be higher in those two places.
Councillor Chair.
So as a comparison, where you have the 23,931 on the average single family home, what would you say it is approximately now, as an example? Like you said, it's about 2 to 3 times. So is that what it is now?
Ours is way bottom.
8,000. So right today, if a person was getting a permit on a single family, it's about 8,000, so it's gonna go to 23 once we.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this is typically something that's charged at subdivision, and for the most part, because all the lots are, most of the things in there have been built up. If someone's building from pretty much a vacant lot within town, there's a high chance that the DCCs have already been paid, so they wouldn't be paying them again.
So if maybe a person had a home that they had torn down and there was already sewer at the lot line, then they would just be paying for a building permit, not necessarily DCCs.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thank you.
So then we also have. So this is also medium density, and then high density, they're pretty much all just roughly showing the same idea that the rates are just sitting where they sit relative to the rest of these. We also have commercial DCCs. These are, I think it's a relatively small change compared to what it was before. And the bigger change would be for the industrial. And that's kind of also partially to do with what kind of industrial developments we're expecting to see in town. Yeah. So the new DCC rates will be in effect immediately after the bylaw is adopted. This means that new applications received after the bylaws will be subject to the new rates. But if an applicant has already put in an application before the bylaw adoption, then they'll be protected. And this also includes the precursor applications, such as a rezoning or development permit, because those will be required prior to them getting the building permit. But also, though, they have to still apply and be able to provide us with enough stuff so that we can approve the approval
Councilor Hogan?
permit before. Yeah.
Thank you. So when we talk about these DCCs, I noticed that, with the exception of low and medium density, so we will be with the proposed new DCCs, we will be above average. So when we are talking about these proposed DCCs, is this something that is coming from staff, or what was the consultant that was hired at that time who came up with these proposed DCCs?
So you want to try first? Okay, thank you. So this is based on the project list that was before, and then calculated based on the information that they had, because at that time they didn't provide the full, or based on the stuff that I've started with, they didn't have the full list of how that would break out for the rest. Did that
Okay with that answer?
help, or is that?
One more question.
Sure. Rebuttal.
Thank you. So before our CAO mentioned that because of the low DCCs, we are experiencing high developments, correct? So now when I see these numbers, that the low and medium density, so I see huge increases. So is there any concern that this may impact the number of developments for future in our area?
CEO?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Regarding the low and medium density and the numbers, one thing to think about as well is province is actually pushing us to higher density as well, right? So from a strategy perspective, if we want higher density, we want to discourage lower and mid density through potentially higher rates. So it's one of the strategies that can be used. That was sort of following up on what you were saying before. And I have to apologize. I lost the second part of your question in my head. Yeah, so 100% that the level of rates, and which is what we really have to focus on, is obviously going to affect, the potential of future development, because investment, these numbers get moved to the end product. So at some point, somebody's paying that. It'll be the consumer. When you think about trying to lower the cost of housing in a place like Merritt as being one of the primary goals, and we're talking about that. We have a housing organization trying to come up with more affordable housing. This type of thing makes housing less affordable, at least for new housing. So there's a there's a lot to the decision and how we want to get where we're going, but a lot of these numbers that were generate largely based on policy and the goals of higher density by nature, if that makes any sense. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I may add to that, yeah, to get back to it is what the consultants that were working on with the number wise is under a different assumption of what density is permitted for like the different areas. And with this one is just a change of has a bit of a change in what kind of density we're expecting to see, and that's what affects the rate of it.
So CEO, just a quick question. And then Councillor Charlie has a question. So the rate that we're at right now, how much are we burdening the taxpayer by not staying a little bit more to average? And I'm asking you to kind of just ballpark it. I mean, are we experiencing, are we losing out at this point in time and taxpayers are having to foot some of this, or I'm just wondering.
Well, the things that we're finding in the infrastructure as we're doing our analysis, and the fact that we haven't been spending the previously collected DCC money and doing much in the way of DCC projects, is sitting in an account. So yes, we're building a bit of an infrastructure debt and requirements to expand serviceability. That said, it's not all new development related either, which is why we have that cost split. And for us to do anything with these projects, we can use some of the DCC account, but we have to be able to fund the rest of it because we have our own municipal assist factors and our responsibility for the part of the project that's not growth related. So our piping network by and large is there. If things get replaced based on, you know, if the sewer pipe that's already 70 years old, we should have already been replacing it. So that burden exists with the tax base. If we're upsizing that pipe, a little bit of a crapshoot on how we attribute what part of that is growth from everything from the pipe itself to backfill to pavement requirements and everything else to fix the road afterwards. A little bit of, but it's a lot. The tax base itself, I mean, we have aged infrastructure and that's going to come through this stuff in all sides, which is one of the reasons I think that Merritt hasn't traditionally done a lot in the way of DCC projects. Is it's hard to fund anything because so much of the project has to come out of the tax base, not just the DCC account. We can't just build a project with DCC money unless it's a brand new piece of infrastructure, like a pathway that wasn't there before and it's all growth related. So something like a roundabout at Grimmett, right? In theory, if that's improving in itself, there's already an intersection there. I mean, there probably could be an argument made that that whole roundabout could be DCC built. But then again, we have to figure out how much of that functionality of the roundabout versus the standard intersection is actually getting us more capacity. We build Boat Street, 2 lanes. It was 2 lanes before. Street itself, there's no capacity increase. Pipes underneath, yes, there is, because we upsized them. So the burden is going to be one way or the other. Our aging infrastructure is going to come back and kick us one way or the other for how we capital plan this.
Councillor Sharon.
I was just wondering how you determine the increase in rates, because it goes from 50% to 2/3 and then 9 times. Like your industrial DCCs went from $8.99 to 58. Oh no, to 71.88. So that's just about 9 times. So I'm just wondering how you came about that. There's such a wide variation in each category. Why isn't it the same for each one? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so that's partially related to, so in the past DCC's 2007 DCC project, the forecast was pretty much like 80% was going to be single family homes and then like a decrease in amount for higher densities. With this one, it's been shuffled, most aligned with OCP as well, to be closer to 50% is going to be medium density, with around 30% for a low density development, which essentially would be that. And then also just a change in the forecasting for how much commercial versus industrial is going to happen. And because these the projected like development in that way is different from what was previously there. How that is, how the DCC's like the amount that's allocated changes, and that's why it's not an even.
So it's like on demand. If there's a higher demand, you're going to charge more?
CEO.
This might help clarify it. If we're thinking about, we expect more commercial industrial development and that's creating a higher number, is because that's what the forecast is telling us is likely to happen versus other types of development. Does that make, am I there?
Yeah.
So the forecasting is telling us with the OCP and some of the other things we're doing that we expect more industrial development over the next short term, which will be driving the rates, because that then is what's impacting the infrastructure
Because we have.
that we
pay.
have to, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Egan.
Yeah, well, I can see very obviously, I mean, we haven't done an upgrade in the DCC since 2007. So it's obviously gonna go up. And I would say that we're fairly close to the average already. It's not that much difference. And then the only problem I have a problem with is understanding your formula. Like, what was the one part, the one line? I just don't get it.
Fair enough. It's took me a while to try to figure out like what exactly like this is based off of what was suggested in the best practice manuals that the province provided, and it's just it's it's
But ultimately, this becomes a decision of council where we go, correct? With your input. With these numbers, so. CEO.
Yeah, so 100% council has to support the rates that we're targeting, and remembering that it becomes political because the impact on the community comes from that decision. The science, based on projects and the calculations, that is recommending a rate. The original science that landed in my lap was predicting about 9 times across the board, with things being a little bit more stable across different types of development. We get a little bit more variation now, but very much the decisions that you make now are yours. We can adjust the data. It still has to go through, what minister is it? We have to go through to get approvals for this?
the inspector of municipalities. That's
Yeah, so we do have to get provincial oversight on this as far as approval once we get the readings going. And it has to make sense to them as well, and that's where, you know, this crazy math and this stuff all comes out, but the complexity of it really comes down to when you think about municipal assist factors, where you see your rate being. We may have to make some adjustments if you're not happy with what this is gonna do from a development and investment perspective. I hate targeting numbers because that's the whole point of hiring a consultant to do the work, so that we're sort of hands off on it. Just this didn't work that way, and we almost have to target numbers based on where all the information came from in the first place. All the capital planning happened, you know, probably 3-4 years in advance of the start of this project in order to get information in there. And a lot of that, like I said, is not likely to happen. We have other projects that we're seeing now that should happen as we learn more about the infrastructure, and they're gonna move in and out. But very much our decisions on this impact how development looks at investing in our community, which is what makes it more political than science. But the science is here to guide you on what the cost implications are when you're making a decision. So if you say, I don't like a 3-time multiplier from what we have now, but you're comfortable with doubling it, recognizing that when we do things, the rest of the money has to come from somewhere. So you're handicapping the existing tax base to encourage development, which also helps build tax base for the long range. So that's where the politics come in, 100%, and that's your decision. Not the science here is not necessarily it. It's there to guide you so you understand number-wise what you're giving up and what you're gaining in each case.
Councillor Egan.
I would like to see a map of the city, or a list of where you see proposed developments happening in the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, you have a better understanding of how many applications you have, but as opposed to us, we don't.
CEO, sorry, I'll stop hitting that thing when you just leave it on, but that's where the hard part comes is it's really difficult to predict where people are going to invest, which is why these documents need to be reviewed annually. We need to watch how things change and we can't leave them sit for going on 20 years. If we manage this on an annual basis and keep it living, we'll be able to adjust on the fly and make sure that we're looking at real projects, not fantasy projects. Because a lot of the projects we had to start with were, like I said, 20 years out, you can't even see it happening. So
Oh, hold on, Councillor Chair, your mic's not on. Yours is.
Oh, thank you. So with the development where Mako is, were we able to apply DCC since that was a new development? And how much of a shortfall would you say we had because we had such outdated DCCs?
So your shortfall in that world, the subdivision built all its infrastructure and it's connecting to existing infrastructure. The expectation that that development is going to continue to build out. They paid the DCCs on building permit, if I'm not mistaken, any future buildings, because you don't know what they're building. So in that environment, you would normally defer your DCCs to building permit stage rather than subdivision, because we have a large piece of land that you don't know what they're going to put on, and square footage makes a difference in what you're paying, right? Because square footage is loadings, which is impact infrastructure, whether it's people, whether it's sewer, whether it's water.
But didn't piping have to get put in underneath there for the?
Yes, while that was built by the developer,
Okay,
the DCCs in theory would be going towards the offsite stuff that already exists that they're connecting to. So if we need to do upgrades, the money they're paying into that would help us with the upgrades offsite.
so we didn't have upgrades to have to do, like putting in wider piping for a commercial building of that?
Not at this time,
Okay,
not saying it won't happen.
Yeah.
And when we look at things in the budget in the budget items where we have modeling exercises that we're trying to do on storm and water
Mhm.
and sewer, those are the things that are telling us that we're running into grief at different times and where to start thinking best to place money. The things like the East Merritt Utility Corridor Study that's showing the sewer transmission from 286 all the way to the plant through town. These are things that are identifying projects and constraints that we need to adapt to. They're a little ways away from where Mako is. What they're doing, though, it's going to come down, it's going to go through Collettville into the sewer plant. That area is probably, it's got newer sewer from 1998. It's probably fine from a sizing perspective because it's a little bit more modern and wasn't done 50, 60, 70 years ago. Okay. The analysis and the modeling is going to tell us what we have to adapt to, right?
thank you.
Councillor Regan.
Yeah, going back about a year ago, I went to a meeting with some of the city staff and they were going to be compiling a land management survey as to what areas can be developed on, who's owning land that are just sitting on it and finding out what their proposals are going to be. I'm just wondering how that report's coming along. And if that could help us understand where we as a city want to see development and what kind of development.
Correct me if I'm wrong, CEO, but that would be the report we sent to JEDI, would it be not? Well, but the available lands that we had as city, the available lands that contractors own. That's the JEDI that we sent to the government.
Part of that, and I think there was more work being done to actually create to create more of a comprehensive look at this stuff. Some things that we can put into the GIS, and I've heard things about that recently because we've had GIS requests to that effect as far as building out the layers so we can all see them.
So could council see what was sent to JEDI? I'm sure we must have a copy of that somewhere.
We'll find it.
Oh, hold on a second.
Continue
Okay.
really quickly.
Really quickly.
Is to add on to that, to find out what infrastructure is there and what needs to be, if certain proposals go through.
Yes, and that's where the issue of the capital planning comes that we're sitting on right now is it's never really been done. I've seen snippets of it over the years when I go back and look at files. So as we go through the asset management and condition assessments, and then work on building out overall capital plans for what we actually see and how our existing infrastructure is. We're still in that little bit of a thumbs up range on a lot of this stuff, because all of that has not been done. And it takes a good bit of time and effort to get it there. So a lot of the little bits of work that have been done, you know, I've been back all the way into the, you know, late 1990s on trying to find stuff. And there's been a little bit of progress, but we don't have a cohesive theory-based long-range capital plan.
Okay,
I think the other thing that council has to understand is that at some point, we had some directors that were doing handshake deals with no backing of any kind, which we now find. And then we have some issues with that. So that has happened in the past. Councillor Turner?
I understand that we do have to raise the DCCs. They were very low. I don't have an issue with everyone, with any of them except for one, because they're very close to the average. But the industrial one, you know, the average is $49 and we're going up to 71. I just find that one just a little high. And industrial is what we're trying to attract too. And if we're below, if we're twice the amount of Chilliwack, in West Kelowna, we're, you know, double, that could be a deterrent for someone to say, you know what, I can go to Chilliwack, I can go to West Kelowna. But that's the one where I find that maybe we could
But when
readdress.
you're talking about Chilliwack and West Kelowna, you're not talking $700,000 an acre, you're talking $2 million an acre.
Yeah.
So there is some
Just
differences
okay.
there. So we are the last bastion before you hit the $1 million per acre properties.
Well, I can agree with that, but
No,
I'm just
I'm
thinking
just saying.
that's a pretty big hike. And the average is 49.26. So that's the only one I have an objection to.
Fine, no problem. Then Councillor Egan again.
yeah, I would just wanted to add maybe to that the industrial would also, being a little bit higher, would have to take in more consideration to whatever climate they may be affecting. Climate change, those kinds of things. That's all I want to say.
CEO, anything else? Your mic was on? No. Okay. Shaming, back to you, since back to you again.
Yeah, well, thank you. So we did have an engagement. We tried to get some feedback just regarding the rates and like how they would affect development moving forward in terms of like whether or not this would deter development. Fortunately, our responses were and engagement was quite low. We only had 2 attendees at the open house and received 5 survey responses. And yeah, it was, you know, it was mentioned that, you know, like whether or not these DCC rates would actually deter development. And the other thing that I think is kind of interesting to note, and that I think is worth considering too, is one of the attendees mentioned that Merit's DCCs could be, you know, like at the average, you know, with the places nearby, but there's always a question of whether or not Merit's say the market can actually handle like what that rate is, because say if you have development in Kelowna or Chilliwack, you can get a lot higher sale prices for developments there. So that's something to also consider. But also thinking about the DCCs and its impact on future development. As CIO has mentioned that there is that political component of thinking about the municipal assist factor. And I'm just going to go over quickly, like, you know, what that can actually mean. And so the municipal assist factor that represents the city's portion, like investment into growth, into the upsizing of infrastructure. And compared to other inputs into calculating DCCs, this one's in my opinion, it's a bit easier to adjust because it's more of a question of like how we want to allocate the funds. Of course, there is always going to be the question of how much that's actually going to affect the taxpayers, right? Because it's ultimately that. So the municipal assist factor can be has to be applied to all projects in a category, but it can be applied you can apply different rates to different categories. So for example, the calculations were all done by 1% municipal assist factor across all four of the DCC categories we're doing. But another option I have listed as option 5 here is to charge DCCs 1% for roads, 1% for drainage, and then 50 for water, 20 for sewer. And that's just like one of the examples of how you can use that. And with that, you can see that the rates get adjusted differently based on that. So you can set like having the DCC rates just be adjusted down to a lower level through the use of a municipal assist factor. Or you can also, the other way to do it would be to use the municipal assist factor to phase in the development cost charges so that it's not as drastic of a jump in one go. So you can change it to first year you're using a higher municipal assist and then decreasing over years so that it's a gradual transition into a higher rate. So also just remember that this is just an example for like how you can use the municipal assist factor. Ultimately, that would have to be a more of a discussion of like how and what the implications of having a higher municipal assist factor is. Other ways to adjust and change the DCCs that a development would end up paying. One can do changing the exemptions. For example, would be going to the changing what kind of work would be exempt from DCCs. So currently the legislation actually protects it so that below 50 building permits for works below 50,000 are exempt from DCCs. But the city can also, through a bylaw, increase that rate to push it to not sure what the limit is, but we can the city can set it up to a higher rate so that smaller scale developments will be exempt from paying the DCCs. The other thing too is the city can also introduce waivers or reductions to DCCs for projects that have like a lower environmental impact or rental housing. And a lower environmental impact would be one of those ones where it's very easy to understand that these projects would tend to have a lower impact on the city's infrastructure, and therefore can be done that way to find a way to reduce DCCs. So of course, there's also big questions too, is like whether or not the appropriateness of growth pays for growth or having all development pay for infrastructure upgrades is the right approach. There's also other sayings where city can invest first and try to recover later. And then that also goes into the question of at what rate do DCCs need to set? Because if they're too high, no development happens, then no DCCs come in. So depending on the changes as discussed here, we'll make for the next steps, we'll be making changes as required or adjusting how the project direction will be going. And then here are just the steps towards the next few steps towards adopting the bylaw so that we can start charging these rates.
Councilor Egan,
What's the deadline for getting this into the inspector of municipalities?
I don't believe there is one, is there?
There's no deadline or that I'm aware of. And it's just based on whenever
It's been since 2007,
Yeah.
so I think any deadline's pretty much gone.
and probably would take around 5 weeks or more for them to go through and give approval.
Just a question I have, people, to the open house, September 24th, 2025, it says concerns regarding magnitude of DC increase, suggestions of phasing DCCs over a longer term. Acknowledging that Merritt's DCCs have not kept up with the construction, suggested longer term 10 years to catch up. So when we're talking about 10 years to catch up, that's like a certain amount every year for the next 10 years. Is that what somebody is suggesting here? Or can we move in that direction? Like, can we phase this in slowly, or we can just take the whole bite and go, or is that what we're talking about here, Shane?
So that was a suggestion, and because DCCs, like if you're doing if you're making changes, so every 4 years, if
Mhm.
you're just doing that inflationary adjustments, you're fine. But basically, this would probably mean that the next bylaw would also be up, would have to take into consideration that we're trying to do a phased approach. But I think we can also, it can be done to set it, but that would be, if you're doing it over 10 years, under one bylaw, you're probably doing it by adjusting your municipal assist factor all the way through. Versus if you do it in two separate bylaw.
I would
new
see it.
program, you do a different
I
way.
think 10 years is too generous. I think we'd be talking maybe 2 to 4 years. I see 10 years is, that's obviously a contractor talking. Questions from council? Well, Manuel, I know you want to. Council Logan.
No, it's clear that we need to update our DCCs. So like Councillor Egan said, so it's been since 2007. So the OCP has been updated already twice through all this time. So I just feel like a little uncomfortable with what is proposed here. So I'm happy to revisit those amounts, but I'm not sure if I would be comfortable with what is proposed at this time. My question to staff. What is your position regarding amenity cost charge? So we are not charging right now so far, and there are other municipalities that are charging the ACC, which is geared towards different development. What is your position on those?
Am I allowed to share that or? So the ACCs would function similarly to DCCs. I think it would, if you're layering them on top, you're essentially putting a bigger burden on the development. And as much as, for the past, we're not, there has been development in Merit with the lower DCC rates. It's not exactly the same as everyone's rushing here. So I think there's something else that maybe needs to be considered as well. And to put in another essentially financial barrier, I think it needs a lot more consideration with the economic impacts of introducing higher like fees, like increasing the ECCs or adding ACCs on top of that.
But for myself, I see things like if we go to low density residential DCCs, right now we're at 8,085 and we're talking about going up to 23,931. Now I understand this will be a 2025. But when I look at Kamloops at 2020 and they're 10,696. For me to go so drastically high, I know, but that's still pretty high. That's a pretty big, large increase considering they're at 110,000. We're at what, 8,000. So I understand there's some ability to chew some of this up because of the population. That seems pretty extreme for us as far as I'm concerned. I mean, again, these are the numbers that just jump out at me. Councilor Petrosi.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think the numbers are a little high. Well, the cost to build here, say 1,000 square foot home compared to building in Kelowna, it costs more to build here, right? Because you have contractors that have to travel long distances to come here. So your dollar per square foot is they're going to be paying more here and sell the house for 600,000. They'll sell the house in Kelowna for $1 million, the same house, and it costs cheaper to build. But at the same time, property is more, as the mayor said, like say Kelowna, Chilliwack property is more compared to, buying here. But I just think building a house here costs a lot more. I think the contractors that were at the open house were kind of concerned about that. They mentioned that. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Councilor Attorney.
Can we take each one and discuss the rate and decide if that's what we want, or instead of
Well,
just lump summing?
This is
everything?
Cal, so you can't make any decisions.
So can we eventually do that? Take each one separately and discuss it, because you might agree with 3 and not agree with, with 2. So I think each one has to be addressed separately because they're all unique. So in the future, that's what I would like to do. That's me.
Well, we could, this might be an opportunity to move this to policy. Because I mean, we have no deadline. It's been since 2007, so we don't have to, this could be a policy committee meeting with everyone attending or 2. and talk about some of these numbers. But you've also got to remember, when you look at the other side, you're looking at, we're talking about Kamloops 2020, so they're going into 6 years since they've done a review. So who knows what they might be after their review is done. So, so
So if there is direction you want to see us take this back and work on as
Yes.
well, we can definitely take that. I think it's simply you can't do motions right now.
No.
So, but definitely open to suggestions. When we started this project, or at least when we started tearing it apart and looking at it again in the fall of 2022, the decisions made at the time was that the community could withstand potentially in that 1.5 to 2 times rate of where it was now. We've slipped up a little bit higher, but there's been a fair bit of inflation in that period of time as well. That's one of the driving factors on where we were with the data to where we are now, from the 1.5 to 2 times to a little bit more. So, but definitely this decision is something you live with and impacts the community 100%. So you definitely want to take the time to make sure you're comfortable with it. If you want to look at some other solutions or what it takes to change numbers, we do have that ability. He's shown you a couple of mechanisms that we can modify numbers with, and use those mechanisms. Obviously, the moving to ACC type charges also pile on top of things. So all of this is about, there's a cost of development to the existing infrastructure. There's also a cost involved in if we don't have development investment, where things kind of stay the same. So, and we really, at least in my view, we really need to start accounting for the fact that, if mills are changing their viability, and we got to replace tax base with something. So getting this right and comfortable. It's a shame we didn't get any more feedback at the open house and through the questionnaires. We did send direct invitations out to many known developers and tried to get them to come see the feedback or provide feedback. And yeah, we got 2 people that represented, 1 developer. And it's unfortunate. It would have been nice to see more feedback, but I guarantee you that depending on the decisions that you make, 6 months or so after the decision's made, you will get feedback. And this is something that is really hard to go back on if you're not comfortable with it. So let's take the time to make sure it's right.
So
Okay.
just looking at these graphs, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not the best at numbers. These all seem to be about a 3-time increase. For myself, I would like to see what a 1, 1.5, or a possibly 1, 2, and 3 would look like. Because to me right now, this looks like we've gone from 42 to 71, so that's a 2 there. But in here, we've gone from 4,000 to 11,004, so that's almost 3 times. So maybe if we could just get a look at what a 1% increase, 2% increase. We've already got this, which is very close to 3, if I'm wrong here. But if we could just get those numbers. And also, I hate to take up all of your time here, but what the Pratt Falls would be if we went to those numbers, like what would we be seeing as a community, as a city? What would we now have to throw in to make it work, as opposed to this? So I think what you're hearing here from us at this point is the fact that we know that we are seeing a lot of development in our community because our DCCs are so low. And we don't want to stifle that growth as we move along here. But I think we need to look at a few more numbers, and it's been almost 20 years. So I think maybe about another 4 or 5 months of looking at this and talking about it probably can get us where we need to be. But yeah, I mean, that's just me, Councilor Ogle. No, wait, Councilor Etchart, you hit the button first.
Wow.
Councilor Etchart, you're up.
So if you have a house with a suite, like I was looking in the definitions where it's got medium density, it's got 3 unit, more than 3 stories in height, and consisting of 3 or more dwelling units. So if a person was just building a house with a secondary suite, is that still considered low density, like as a single family essentially? Where they would pay, say, the 23 versus the medium, or?
If they're building or adding a secondary suite,
Into a home, it's still considered the
That-
main single family kind of low density, right?
under the current and proposed bylaw, it just wouldn't count because it's just an accessory.
But if it was a new lot and the person was building a house with maybe just a suite in it or even 2, would that still just be considered low density then, because it would just be considered like a single family home with a suite?
If it's on a new lot,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be,
Which would be like the 23 instead of the 8,000 it is now? Okay,
essentially.
Councilor Hogan.
Thanks.
So it seems to me that council is in agreement of the increase. We are just determining what is gonna be that amount. So I do feel that it could be beneficial to see those scenarios, but also I want to know what is the goal here. So if there's a certain rate that we want to get to, so I want to also to explore, is that gonna be a 3 year to get there, or is gonna go a 5 year? I would go 5 max, not the 10 that we were discussing. So by knowing that, we have to have an idea, so how long it's going to take us to get there, in scenario number 1, 2, or 3. So that's what I would need. Thank you.
Yeah, and then we can put a time limit on it. We'll see where we want to go. Any other questions, Council? Councilor Regan.
Yeah, I'd still like to know how this formula works because I'm looking at the page and I don't see where you get some of the numbers from. I don't know what the pages are, but it says DCC sample count calculation. I see where you get the 1,726,000. I see where you get 758. I think I saw that. No, maybe not.
Okay, so. You want, okay, I just thought I'd put it in just for, show what we have to deal with. So column 1, say estimated new development, that's, you have the residential, that's the number of dwelling units that we're forecasted to see, built. Bottom, industrial and commercial and institutional, that's the floor area that we're expecting to see built. The equivalencies, that's essentially to say what the expected, impact on, the road system is going to be, and that's drawn from best practice guide. And to my understanding is like a lot of that has to deal with engineering stuff that I'm not qualified to deal with. And then the equivalent units, that's so the column 4. So with 1, it's basically to say with the expected development that we see in column 1, that's the expected impact across these whole categories as a total, and that's what's shown there. And so that's the total equivalent. So that's the total impact that's expected to be seen on the infrastructure. And then you go to section B, where we have that's the net DCCs that's recoverable. That's the portion that's attributable to growth. And then you take out the existing DCC road reserves, and that's because the past DCC bylaw has been charging for roads. And then take out the municipal assist factor. And then you find out how much DCCs you need to pay per equivalent unit. And then go back and remultiply by what is it? The equivalency factors to see how much of that money, what essentially translates to the cost that each one of these is going to be imposing on the city, or will be expected to, the city needs to pay in order to cover that kind of development that we're seeing.
Why do they have to make this so hard?
That's a lot of room.
That's what they want to see to justify it and approve it, I guess. My understanding.
Yeah, no kidding. Are you starting
Did
to
that
see
help,
it?
or?
Are you starting to see it there? Well, if you follow, I mean, I'm not the best at math, but if you follow the formula there, like D equals 1%, or E equals B minus C minus D. So you
Yes,
pull
I
that,
get that.
so you get all that out of there, and then of course, so you start removing everything below. And then you times it by the F amount, but my page is kind of cut off. I'm not sure I got
Mine is
every,
too.
I think that's why you might not be seeing it, because I think our page has been cut off.
I think it's.
Yeah.
It's squeezed into the slide very awkwardly, but the last institutional line, that's the last line in it. Sorry about that.
No, it's not
I'll
your
work
work.
my
That's the way it is. Councilor Regan? You're still on.
I'm good.
Okay. So I would suggest if you have some more issues on that, maybe stop in and see and talk, and maybe they can walk you through. That's what I would do. Yeah. CAO.
So if I may, yes, thank you. I was going to suggest that if we need to do any one-on-one working sessions, 100%. would welcome that, because once again, we have to get this right. And you have to be able to live with the results. Now, bearing in mind that all of these things that he's working through on here are compliant with OCP. We're going back one though, because all those calculations came from the previous OCP, correct? So assumptions that are being made are also linked to assumptions being made in OCPs. So these all have to gel together from an assumption basis. The beauty of most of this stuff is we don't necessarily have to mess around with project lists and go back to a lot of detailed calculations when we do have a couple of strategies built into this that can easily change numbers based on decision. And he's already reviewed those with us. We can go over those at any given time as well, just as reminders, and one-on-one as well if you want. So we have the ability based on decisions on those decision points and the tools that we have to modify numbers. We don't have to go back into all the calculations to generate things. When we change this, I believe you got this built, so most of your calculations auto update, correct? So
Try to, yeah.
I think we have about three different decision factors that we can place on this that make it simpler than worrying about how we get through all the math. That helps out at all. But definitely, if you want to come in and sit down and go through this stuff, I welcome that, because we got to get it right.
Thank you, Sia. Schwing, you're free. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for all the hard work. Appreciate it. Thank you, Christian, for all your hard work and your presentation. Okay, we have a recommendation that the committee of the whole recommend to council that the City of Merritt Development Cost Charges bylaw be adopted. Probably at this point, we don't want to do that. We probably would like to refer this to more information. You receive it, yeah. Seal, what's the proper wording here?
That the presentation from Shiming, who put in his title, be received for information.
Okay, so recommendation that the presentation from Shiming be exactly what she said. I need Councillor Etchart, Councillor Charney. All those in favor? Thank you. We are terminated. Thank you all.